Hello everyone, I'm Tori.
And I'm Kariana.
And welcome to God in All Things. And this week we are continuing the Marvel journey with Avengers, the first Avengers film, which is really exciting. It's one of the best ones too, in my opinion. So I'm really excited to chat about this one. Let's start with the summary, of course, which I wrote up this week. So, it's been 70 years, but the Tesseract has not been left alone. S.H.I.E.L.D. continues to study and use it for their own gain. However, the door to the other side of space opens on both sides, and there are some who are interested in Earth for dangerous reasons. Thankfully, as seen through the past few films, Earth has a team of capable and powerful heroes, but can the lone wolves learn to work together? And that is what this movie very much explores, is them learning how to work as a team. So, personal experiences. This was, I think, the first Marvel movie I ever saw, actually. I may have seen one beforehand, but I'm pretty dang sure I hadn't. I think I had just seen... No, I had seen Captain America for sure. I may have seen at least one other. I'm not sure. I knew, like, who the characters were, so from, like, ads and whatever. So I went into it pretty blind, but it was also the one that made me completely fall in love with the world of Marvel, all of the characters. It was my first experience with Iron Man, and I really liked him. And then, of course, Captain America still won my heart. It was one where I remember seeing it with my best friend at the time, and we came out of it just so in love with Chris Evans. It was like game over for us. We were like probably, I don't know, 2012, what grade would I have been in? Ninth grade?
Yeah.
So yeah, just a little middle school / high school, early high schooler, just falling in love with this actor, and it's really stood out for me for a long time. I really enjoyed it at the time, and I've continued to really enjoy it as I've gotten older, and even as other movies have come out, it's remained one of my favorites, which I think a lot of people have the same feelings. So
yeah, this is where it starts to get hard for me, because they all kind of start to blur together.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Because I did, like I've said before, I watched all of them from the very beginning, and so there reaches a point where it's kind of like I just saw them.
They're
and
all
I
the
don't
Marvel
like
movies,
I don't like have super specific memories. But I was saying to Tori earlier, like, this one, watching it again, because that's the other thing, I've watched them all like one, maybe two times, so I haven't seen any of these since like 2012. But yeah, so watching this, like, a lot of the kind of standout moments with characters and the moments that I remember like falling in love with characters were in this movie, where it's like, oh my gosh, yes, that moment, you know, that I really remember and really, really love and appreciate. So that was fun to realize. And I really, it's just like such a ridiculously well done movie. Like, I love Marvel, and I have stayed like I've stayed a Marvel fan, and I'm caught up on everything, and I love watching them. But watching this, I was like, okay, I actually do have to admit that like things have probably gone downhill, because this is like just such an excellent movie. Yes. Funny enough, the fact that you bring up Captain America, I realized that I was saying, like, when I was, again, talking to you about it earlier, I was like, these are the moments when I fell in love with Iron Man, you know, and I remembered why I love Thor and why I love Hulk, and, like, my list ended there.
I did notice.
You did notice.
Was like, I almost said something about, not Captain America.
Oh my gosh, it really took until Civil War for me to have any appreciation for him. Like, there are things to love about him in this movie, but like even now, like appreciating him and loving him as a hero, like it's still like Tony says something and I just think he's so fabulous. And Chris Hemsworth, what you just described with Chris Evans, I was a Chris Hemsworth girl all the way. Fair. Like all of high school, if you asked me my favorite Marvel Chris, it was Hemsworth. Hands down, no debate. And oh my gosh, I just love him in this movie so much. But yeah, I love the beginning MCU when they still, I don't know, when they took themselves a little bit more seriously, it seems like, and they allowed themselves to be more serious, and they still let Loki and Thor like have their more like old-fashioned language and that kind of stuff. I just really, really love the vibes of it, where it's funny but also really intense and serious.
Yes. Yeah, I think there are a few
beautifully.
Yeah, there are a few characters who become kind of comedic relief later on in a way that's charming in some ways, but does...
Not my personal preference.
Yeah, kind of... It completely changes them and makes them less interesting in the end.
And I really love these just early heroes and the early relationships.
And just seeing them become heroes as a team for the first time and getting that first, like, oh my gosh, all these people we love that are just joining together. Yeah.
It's awesome. And I do love Cap. I don't want anybody to think I don't. So, well, you'll see a shift when we get to Civil War, I promise.
I think we dive a little deeper into more of a well-roundedness with him because I think he's being faced with something that's a lot more complex than they have had to deal with.
Introduces a little more gray into his life and character.
Yes, and it's super interesting.
So the principle we're going to be talking about today is gathering Israel. We've already talked a little bit, Tori's mentioned a couple of times, like them working together as a team and coming together and learn to work together. So we're going to be kind of focusing on this gathering concept. So since Abraham, God has chosen certain groups of his children to gather those who are scattered and lost back into his fold. Today, we're commanded to spread the gospel to all people as part of the continuing war between God and the adversary, so as many people as possible can experience the joy of the atonement and celestial glory in the eternities.
So let's just jump into the film without much further ado, and we'll pull the Gathering of Israel idea throughout as we talk about this. So the film starts off with a narration done by one of Thanos' little henchmen, who's kind of leading the armies behind Loki in the background a little bit more throughout this film. And he just basically is talking about the Tesseract, which was in Captain America, and hinting at a planned attack on Earth. And so that's where we start off, and then we go to S.H.I.E.L.D., where they are working with the Tesseract, and we see Nick Fury, we see Phil Coulson, Dr. Selvig, and Hawkeye are all there. They're the key players, and Agent Hill as well is another one that's a key player there. And the Tesseract is starting to do strange things, so that's why Nick Fury has been called in. He's here to look at it, and they're worried it's going to like cause an explosion. So they're getting a bunch of people out, a bunch of stuff out, and pretty quickly, I really like a line that Nick Fury says to Agent Hill about the situation. She's basically like, why are we prioritizing getting this stuff out? Like, we could not be safe anywhere. Like, who knows? This could be a huge explosion. We don't really know. And Nick Fury tells her that until the time when the world seems like it is going to be destroyed, we will behave as if it intends to spin on. And I really like that he's just like, okay, we need to just embrace what's here in the moment. And I think sometimes in the Gathering of Israel, we focus a lot on future possibilities and not enough on doing what we can where we're at now and appreciating that journey aspect. I think that's with everything in life, but I mean, the Gathering of Israel is really key to everything God is doing to help us to fulfill our purposes. And so it gets easy to feel like, oh my gosh, the world's ending, my world's ending, and we forget to just, you know, you're here for a reason. I always say, like, I never want to get to a place where I'm just like hating living. Like, I want to always realize that if God hasn't killed me off yet, so for lack of a better phrase, he probably has something he expects me to do and learn here. So making sure I take advantage of that while the earth is still spinning, while I'm still here, I have things I can be doing.
That reminds me of a quote. So the talk that I studied for this, that goes along with that perfectly, was The Lord Needs You Now by M. Russell Ballard from September 2015. It was a YSA devotional. And he says, as an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ, I invite you to put on the whole armor of God and join the battle today, as the sons of Helaman did so many years ago. Don't wait until you get married or start your lifelong career or get older. The Lord needs you now. And I just love that concept, you know, like it's so easy to think, you know, for you and I, right? It's all about getting married, right?
Yes.
And until then, it's so easy to think like, okay, well, you know, I'm just trying to make ends meet. I've been busy with school. Like there's this and there's that. And I, you know, later on when I'm married and settled, like I can worry about that. Or later on when I'm doing this, or later on when I'm doing this. And we can just always do that. And I love this invitation. Like the Lord needs you right now. There's things that you can be doing right now that the Lord needs right now.
Yeah, and it's such a blessing to know that, because it just makes every moment so much more purposeful. Like, you just feel like, okay, I do have a reason to be here. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to feel sad or tired with life or whatever. Like, it does still happen. But hanging on to the fact that there is something you can be doing, and even if right in that moment it is only a small little thing that you can do to allow God into your life a little bit more, or to help someone else just that tiny bit, every single one of those little moments counts in the grand scheme of things. It's like that same adage that with small and simple things, great things are brought to pass. Like, our little actions, as long as we keep choosing to make them, are really key. And it actually feeds into a later quote once. Okay, so to sum up, Nick Fury gets in there. He has a conversation with Dr. Selvig and with Hawkeye about what's going on. And while he's there, Loki comes through the Tesseract, which at this point we thought he was dead. So everybody's like shocked. Well, they don't really know who he is. We as viewers know who he is and are shocked. And
I forgot we thought he was dead right now.
Yes. And Dr. Selvig is like, wait, you're the brother of Thor. Like, he connects the dots since he was in the Thor movie and knew Thor. And Loki ends up at one point while he likes to give his monologues. He's so dramatic.
He's a dramatic villain.
He's so over the top.
We love it.
Yes, we really do. And he says freedom is life's great lie. And I was like, that literally is the most Satan thing I've ever heard. To just be like, your freedom is meaningless. You want to have someone rule over you. And it's like, I think the natural man part of us in some ways does. Like, I think in some ways he's kind of right if we're focusing on the natural man part of us. We want to be told what to do and have the weight of responsibility off of us. Yep. Just obedience, and that's all. But in the long run, it's our agency and our ability to rule ourselves that will help us progress the most towards what God wants us to become. And so it's very interesting that we're starting off with those two very different perspectives of Nick Fury being like, okay, we're going to keep choosing to do what we can to make the world a better place in little ways as long as the world continues spinning. And then Loki, who's like, freedom is not worth it, basically. And so it's we see right off the bat that this really is good and evil. It's agency versus determinism, things like that. And we take off from there and then start seeing a team being built in order to accomplish more of what Nick Fury was arguing for.
Yeah, I think we even see right here at the beginning, Loki successfully gets everything he wants, or, we set up like the problem of the movie in this scene where Loki is successful, and he does it by recruiting forces. So he goes around, and which is key later because he takes Dr. Selvig and Clint Barton and kind of puts them under some kind of trance where they follow him perfectly. And we have Fury has this kind of this self-destruct explosion set up with the power of the Tesseract. Clint, knowing Fury really, really well, now is on Loki's side and says, oh, Fury's stalling. This place is getting ready to explode and he's going to bring the whole thing down. And Dr. Selvig is like, yeah, this is what's happening and this place is going to blow. It's in the negative sense. But we do see Loki be really successful right off the bat because he recruited these people who are able to kind of get inside. And then Clint says later, oh, S.H.I.E.L.D. has a lot of enemies when he's gathered a bunch of people to help work for Loki. So we have this insider information that Loki gathers by recruiting people who are able to more effectively help him. So I just thought it was interesting that we can see the success of teamwork and gathering on both sides.
I actually really love that because that's what Satan does. He has his team of angels. And so part of why I think God wants us to be a part of Israel and be united, especially here, is because we're fighting someone who is just like that, who is fighting in his own way as a team. Of course, they're not as connected as we're going to be, which is why God's team is going to be successful, is because there's that spirit of unity and that divine power that's behind it. Whereas because all Satan and his followers want is a united desire to make people miserable, which is just not as powerful of a strength and support to them, which connects later. I think I'm probably going to bring up this quote quite a bit because it is really key, I think, to a lot of this, is when Coulson, spoiler alert, is dying and he is talking to Loki and says, "You lack conviction." That's a lot of what Loki is lacking. Like, a lot of where he's coming from, and by extension where the others are coming from, is a place of revenge, which as soon as it's done is going to be meaningless to them. Whereas the heroes are coming from a state of conviction that what they're doing is really right and needed, no matter what sacrifices it requires of them. It's so important. And so we see that right here at the beginning, that kind of start of a difference, because not long after we start gathering the Avengers, and they're just so much more strong and united in their power, as opposed to one person forcing everybody else to do what he says.
Yeah, he really is kind of a perfect little Satan. He's
Yes.
like, he eliminates agency as a factor, and and then all of his team members turn on him as soon as they get the chance.
Yep.
And aren't under his spell anymore.
Yep, they don't actually want to be with him either.
Yeah. Makes me think of, I'm sure you've read the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis.
I haven't, actually.
You haven't?
I really want to. I have it on my shelves.
You need to. Oh my
but I
gosh.
haven't yet.
So good. Super interesting. Obviously, C.S. Lewis, like, takes creative liberties with having, he knows that he doesn't know, but he tells awesome stories and gets really amazing principles across. But yeah, like you were talking about, kind of that lack of unity, like they all are like fighting for one purpose really, really well. Which probably is why right now they're really successful compared to us. Yeah. But in the Screw Tape Letters, so you have this, if you don't know, it follows these devils, basically, who are Satan's lackeys, who are going out and trying to tempt us. It's written through letters, and you have this uncle and his nephew, and the uncle is like giving advice to his younger nephew to tell him how to tempt this I think they call them patients. They have a word for people who they're working on. It might not be patients. I don't remember. It's been a while now. But anyway, so he's giving him all of this advice, and we learn over the course of the story that younger devils any devil who's like not successful, there are like really serious consequences. And the uncle like keeps threatening to like eat him if he's unsuccessful. Okay. Like there are these relatives, they're set up to be blood relatives. How literal that's supposed to be, I don't know, but there's this like competition. It's not we're fighting together for a goal, it's we're fighting against each other to move up the ladder, and there's this hierarchy, and if you fail, then like you suffer the consequences, and if you succeed, then you move up past somebody else. And so just this really interesting idea of them. I've never thought about them being like disunified and they're fighting for themselves ultimately. They all have the same goal, but it's with their own agendas in mind, and that's just never going to be, like you said, as powerful.
So briefly running through it, then we see them start to gather the Avengers together. So Loki does get away. He's controlling Hawkeye, and he's controlling Dr. Selvig. I was like, who's the other one? Dr. Selvig. So they are off making their plans, all that jazz. Nick Fury is like, okay, we need people who can respond to this quickly because we don't have anything else prepared. So that's when they decide to gather the Avengers. We start off with Natasha Romanoff, who is Black Widow and is awesome. We love her. And she ends up working to go get the Hulk, who is now played by, oh my gosh, what's his name? Mark Ruffalo. Thank you. We see Agent Coulson going to get Tony Stark, Iron Man, and then we see Nick Fury going to get Captain America, Steve Rogers. And they all, of course, want to help, but it's interesting to see just they're different based on their past traumas and stuff, how they're responding to this call. Hulk obviously is terrified of becoming the Hulk, and so Bruce Banner is like not sure about this, but they do promise him he's just there to be a scientist. That's why they're asking for his help, which is interesting. He wasn't originally planned to be part of the Avengers. It was more just like he's there to lead the science department, and I'm sure there's a part of them being like, well, maybe we can see what will happen with it if we can figure something out, but he's there to be a scientist. And then we see Steve, who's just like really tormented by the fact he's been asleep for 70 years and is in this whole new world. And he's kind of just hiding by himself, like just continuing to work out and stuff because that's what he knows how to do. And then we see, of course, Tony Stark. He's just a narcissist still. He's still his narcissistic self, and he doesn't like being told what to do. And he also has a bit of a grudge, I guess, or like a dislike of Captain America due to Tony's dad loving Steve Rogers, and so he has kind of a jealousy there. So seeing that he's involved probably isn't comfortable. And he also had his ego hurt a little bit when they told him that he wasn't good enough to be in the Avengers, and now they're inviting him in, so he has to, play a little bit of a victim.
Hey,
anyway.
He shows his learned humility, though.
Yes.
He's willing to be convinced.
Yes, he still comes. It doesn't take a lot of convincing for him. How much of that is just him being like, yeah, hero stuff. Versus,
or his girlfriend.
Yes. Combo. I'm sure it's a combo of multiple things, but a lot of decisions are, so, Anyway, so it's a really great little thing, and then they all end up on the ship, the huge hovercraft thing that they have, and they're all looking for Loki. So they do end up finding him. He's at this ball party thing in Germany, actually. So they send Steve and Natasha specifically to go get him, and then Iron Man ends up showing up during the fight. I really love this scene. It's one of my favorite scenes probably in all of Marvel, but in this particular movie as well. First of all, just a side note, I kind of laughed when Loki is talking to Agent Barton, Hawkeye. Before this attack that he plans, he's talking to him, and they're talking about the Tesseract showing Dr. Selvig new truths and things. And Loki asks Agent Barton what the Tesseract has shown him, and he's like, what I need to do next. And Loki says, what do you need? And I was like, you're kidding me.
Not Loki trying to be the perfect man.
Like Loki.
You are not Kristoff.
He just could sense. That's what a real man says.
Sorry if you haven't. If you're confused, go watch our Frozen episode.
Yes, this is a recurring joke in our discussion, so definitely go check that out. Anyway, after Loki does get there and attacks, we see this really powerful moment where this old man stands up in the crowd. Loki is having everybody kneel to him, just all these random people who are at the party and in the street, and he explains to them that they want to be ruled, that they don't want the freedoms, even though they think they do, and everything he kind of hinted at towards the beginning of the movie. And this older man stands up and he says, not to men like you, like we don't kneel to men like you. And Loki says, there are no men like me. And the man says, there are always men like you. And I love that this takes place in Germany, because it's so recent, especially for an older man like him, that a man was doing that to them before. In World War II.
We have next, Cap comes in because Loki goes to kill this guy and Cap stops him and says, the last time I was in Germany and there was a man standing over people, we didn't end up agreeing.
Yes. Yes.
And so it is such a beautiful parallel.
Yes. Yeah. The symbolism there is beautifully done, and it's not like shoved in your face, but it's also made pretty obvious.
Yeah. Hard to miss.
Yes, it's hard to miss, but it doesn't feel like they're like, hey, look. Like, it's just very natural dialogue to create that feeling and a reminder of what they're fighting against, and that they've fought this fight before, which I think is a very empowering thing in a film where it's going to become much bigger than this team. It's going to become like aliens invading, like a huge thing, but we're reminded early on in the film, like, they've fought this fight before.
It's the same fight. That actually, I love it. That reminds me again of something from my talk where he talks about how our war now between us and the adversary is a continuation of the war in heaven. And it's just, I think there's a reason that idea, like that man's line, there will always be men like you, like that idea speaks to us so strongly because we're here fighting the same fight that we all fought and chose a side on in the premortal life, right? And we're just here trying to get as many people to continue that fight as possible because it's different in the sense that we know we're going to win, and we just want as many of our brothers and sisters to be with us in that victory. But yeah, I love that idea that you just brought up of this. It's the same battle against tyranny. Like, there's always men like Loki, and they're always trying to subjugate people the same way Satan is, and it's our job to just continue to fight that. And even if it feels like a grind, and even if it feels impossible and overwhelming and insurmountable, like, that's what we're here to do, and we'll win in the end.
Yeah, I love it. And then we get the other iconic line in this moment where Steve is fighting Loki, and Loki makes Steve kneel and says kneel, and Steve says not today, kicks him in the face. Iconic.
Not today.
Yeah.
I love those comic book lines. They're my favorite.
So good.
Comic book one-liners.
Just love it. Anyway, it's a wonderful fight, and then Tony shows up. Of course, he gives himself some music to play into him rolling in, which
AC/DC.
I love him. Yes, it's so, again, iconic. We love
Epic.
This movie has so many just iconic moments. I love it. Anyway, Loki ends up surrendering once Iron Man shows up, which is kind of strange for him. I feel like if you're paying attention and thinking about it, you're like, that's not Loki's style. At least not to do that, like, seriously, legitimately. Like, he would be faking it. Like, you just know he's going to be faking it. So,
which I feel like they recognize. Like, they're like, this felt like it was too easy. And Cap is like, yeah, it's usually not this easy.
Yeah.
And then later Nick Fury is one of my favorite lines too. When I love early Nick Fury too. I remembered how much I love him in this movie. When he's like, you know, they have Loki in prison, and he's like, why do I feel like he's the only one who wants to be on this boat?
Yes. Yeah.
So they all great. Kind of
they
sense like there's something off here.
Yes, there's something wrong. Anyway, so yeah, they're on the ship and they have Loki, but they're having, like you said, this conversation, which it's interesting because Tony says that you think it was too easy, because Steve's like saying, I just feel like, and Tony says that you think it was too easy, and Steve, is like, yeah, I don't remember it being like that. And then Tony starts to be snarky, and again, I think you see that jealousy creep in that he has for a little bit of Steve, not like in an open way, but he just immediately, they're having this serious conversation about something
and
serious
agreeing,
and he immediately is like turning into like making fun of Steve for no reason.
What does he say?
He
I don't remember feeling that way.
He basically calls him old. He's like, yeah, it's been a while for you, and is like, how do you even stay looking that good, or whatever.
Okay.
He's like,
okay, yes, I do remember. Okay.
you might have missed a few things doing time as a capsicle. What's your thing? Whatever. Yeah. Anyway, while they're having this conversation, it starts to thunder and lightning, and Loki starts looking all nervous. And the others are like, what are you afraid of? Some lightning? And he's like, I'm not overly fond of what follows. And Thor shows up. It's iconic. Again, I'm going to say that so many times in this episode. I'm so sorry.
Of what follows.
Yes.
And you're like, we know what's coming. Yes. Which, at this point, I was thinking about this one. Do we think that Thor is stuck on Asgard?
Yes.
At this point? Okay, that's what I thought. I was like, did I forget something? Okay.
Yes.
So we thought Loki was dead, and we thought Thor was stuck on Asgard. So both of them are like, oh my gosh.
Like, whoa. And Loki does say to Thor, how much dark magic did Father have to use to conjure you here, like, to make you get here?
So explain it to us a little bit.
Yes. He found a way that was maybe not totally great, but they knew he had to be here.
Thanks, Odin.
Yes. Thank you, Odin, for sending your tool. So Thor just takes Loki. Long story short, he just takes him. And
actually, it's a pretty short story.
Yes,
he legit
it is a really
comes
short
in and takes
moment.
Loki and leaves.
This conversation is probably less longer than that moment.
I think so.
Anyway, but we see the first beginnings of really them all going at it alone. Like, we already kind of know they're going to be like that because they haven't worked as a team before, and now they're being forced to. But Tony starts to leave, and Steve's like, no, we need a plan of attack. And he says, I have a plan, attack, and just leaves. And Steve's like, okay. So immediately goes and gets a parachute. And Natasha's like, you might not want to do this. Like, they're basically gods. And that's when Steve gives the great line, Do you want to say it? Yeah. I know. It was like, we were talking about this right before we started.
I told Tori, I was like, I think this is my favorite line in the whole movie. It's so good. He says, there's only one God, ma'am, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that.
We love the bringing it back and also reminding us this is a man from the 40s. Like, he actually has those values, which is beautiful and wonderful to see.
Yes.
We love it.
Yes. I love that he's allowed to maintain that.
Yes. Me too. So then we end up cutting to Loki and Thor having this conversation in which Thor explains how he got there. And it's so interesting because Thor is talking like, remember when we were kids? Like, we were so close. Like, what happened? And Loki says, I remember a shadow, him being dramatic again. He's always so dramatic. And I love that he goes straight to comparison because I think it just shows that he is such a petty person, a petty and small person. And he's being led by a very evil being because he has these thoughts of revenge and this need to discover his identity and make his parents pay for what he imagines was their slights of him. And Thor also asks Loki, as Loki's talking about ruling the people of Earth and how he'll save them and all this stuff. And Thor's like, you think yourself above them? Like, then you aren't ready to be king. Like, you miss the whole point of ruling, and that's to be a servant to the people you're ruling over, which is very much a Christ-like teaching, is the idea that we are here to be their servants. We're not here to be above them or think ourselves greater than them, because that doesn't actually bring about the progression and growth that God wants to see in us.
Yeah, honestly, Thor right here is like kind of perfect.
Yes.
Like,
this is a great Thor
hardcore
moment.
Like, he's giving a lot of Moroni right now.
True, yes.
He's very Moroni-esque to
Lemuel,
me, I think. And he, this like just occurred to me too as you were talking and I was thinking about the scene. Thor is kind of showing us he's much more personally involved in this than anyone else. Like, this is his brother, you know? Yeah. And I'm so glad he keeps reminding us, because it can be so easy to forget that they grew up together. Yes. Right? And like, not any different than me and my brother grew up together. Yeah. And it's hard to remember sometimes because we don't get to necessarily see all of that. But he does such a phenomenal job right here of balancing mercy and justice. Yeah. And I hadn't thought about that before, but he never stops trying to change Loki and trusting Loki to the point where it can get annoying for us as viewers. But actually, now thinking about it, I'm like, he's loving Loki perfectly. He is always ready for Loki to come back home. At any moment, Loki could say, okay, I'm done. I'm coming home. And Thor would just accept him with ready arms. It'd be like prodigal son moment, father falling on his neck, the whole deal, right? But he also refuses to let Loki believe that anything that he is doing or saying is right. Like, he tells Loki how it is, and he stands up for truth and fights him when he has to make sure that Loki doesn't like ruin other people's lives and influence other people negatively with his own mistakes. And I just love the fact, I've been talking about this a lot this week, that like, I think that's just one of our biggest difficulties in today's society, at least from what I've seen. Like, most of the people who I've seen fall away and have struggles with the church, it comes from this like struggle to find the balance between loving people and also like saying what they're doing is wrong. Yeah. And I just love that Thor is literally a perfect example of that right here in this moment, and in a lot of moments that is not a struggle of his. He's amazing at that. Yeah, it's true. This is a huge moment, but then even during the mega end fight scene, he has a moment same thing like that. Yeah. And it's amazing, and he continues to do it in Thor 2. We'll have a lot more of that too, which that could be a good discussion point, is maybe, that theme. So we'll keep that in the back of our minds. Have to keep that in mind, because I love that one, and he is serious. Yeah, that's so cool. All the way through that one. He's the most willing to accept Loki back if he would just be... And I love that Thor 2, like... He's coming at it from a perspective of he knows Loki has goodness in his heart because he's seen it before. Right. Like, it's not like he's just making it up and he's like, well, he's my brother, so I just like know he has good inside of him. It's like, no, he knows he has good inside of him because he's seen it. He's worked with Loki closely. And even the start of Thor, Loki was not where he is now as far as
how far he's fallen.
For sure.
Like, he was far from that still. It was just a lot of other reveals and other interactions that caused him to fall further and further away. And so Thor really believes he can come back. And yeah, I think that's such a powerful thing. So while they're having this conversation, Iron Man just takes Thor out. He like grabs him and takes him down, and it's a very humorous in the middle of Thor saying something, and Loki's like, I'm listening.
He's like, listen to me. And then Iron Man takes him away. And Loki's like, I'm listening.
So good. We love the Marvel humor. It's great. But they end up having a big fight, and then Captain America comes in and joins the fight a little bit as well. So the three of them are just having this little mini fight. And then they stop after they've like destroyed this whole patch of trees. It's a really interesting moment because, like, you see in all of their faces that they're kind of like, okay, that was really stupid.
You literally
like,
can. It's so
realize,
good.
Oh, wait, what? It was like this bell that went off in their heads, too. Like, that was a stupid way to waste time.
Yeah. They all kind of, like, look around and you totally get, like, okay.
Steve's like, we done here?
Are we done here?
They're like, yeah, I guess. And the talk I actually read for this was one that I really loved revisiting. I hadn't remembered this one, but reading through it, I was like, okay, this one's really good. It's called Seeing God's Family Through the Overview Lens by Sister Tamara W. Runia from this last conference. And in it, she just talks about like seeing things from a bigger perspective, specifically with your family, seeing your family from a bigger perspective and understanding your role within it, but also the human family as well. It's a really, really great talk, like I said, but one of the quotes that stood out to me was, she says, each difficult interaction is an opportunity to learn how to love at a deeper level, a godlike level. And I feel like at this point we're seeing very quickly, this is a really awkward, kind of funny and sad and disappointing moment all at the same time where they're fighting each other. But it's teaching each of them what the others are capable of and teaching them to respect each other just a little bit more, which is obviously key to building up to becoming a great team that's able to save the world, is getting to know each other and getting to respect and like each other a little bit more. This episode has been divided into 2 parts. You have reached the end of part 1. Part 2 will be released the following Thursday. We hope you enjoyed the first half of our discussion. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at God in All Things Podcast. Additionally, if you are interested in seeing what Tori is currently reading, head over to her YouTube channel, Good Strong Words. Thank you again for listening. We hope you are having a wonderful day. Keep remembering to see God in all things, and we will see you next time. Bye!